Hi everybody, Craig Greenfield here. Greetings to you from here in Asia. I wish I could be with you. I'm sending you my prayers. You know, 12 years ago, I was sitting in my doctor's office and he shuffled the papers. He had some papers in front of him and he said, "Craig, I've got very bad news for you." And as he read off the paper, he told me that I'd been diagnosed with cancer, very serious cancer. And I knew in that moment that it was a life and death situation. And after that time, I began to sense God asking me the question, what if you only have 5 years left to walk on this earth? It's a very good question to ask ourselves, isn't it? If you only have 5 years left to walk on this earth, what would you do with those 5 years? And at that time, I sensed deep within me that God was calling me to spend those 5 years, spend the rest of my life serving the most vulnerable children on earth. Now, thanks to God, praise be to God, I've been cured of that cancer. You can see on my head, I have another skin cancer, not so serious, I'm thankful. A little bit of surgery that I had to have to take that skin cancer away. But isn't it a good question? If we only have 5 years left on this earth, what would you do with those 5 years? And all of us in the Alongsiders movement are committed to building this movement that would serve the most vulnerable children on earth and to equip and mobilize and awaken the youth of our churches. And I want to focus in today on that word movement. A lot of us have come from the NGO background, the organizational background. We're used to having business cards and ID cards and buildings and staff and vehicles. We know what an NGO looks like. But we need the imagination to see that God is building alongside us, not as an NGO, but as a movement. And let me explain why I say that. A movement goes beyond just one person. That's why I talked about the possibility that I may not be around. Because all of us are here on earth for a certain amount of time, and then we will go to be with our Lord. Will the movements and the things that we have invested in go on beyond us? That's the question I want to ask you today. Are you building a movement or a project? Are you investing in a movement or are you trying to do some kind of NGO? And Alongsiders is very much a movement. Alongsiders is a movement because movements are not built on our egos. That's why in Alongsiders gatherings, we're not using terms like bishop or pastor. We're calling each other brother and sister because it's not about hierarchies, it's about relationships. And discipleship, which is what God has called us to go out into all the world and make disciples. Discipleship only happens through relationships. It doesn't happen through paperwork and budgets. We need that sometimes, don't we? We need to have some of that. But at the heart, a discipleship movement is about relationships. It's about sharing a meal together. That's why we're sharing meals together at our Asia and Africa gatherings, rather than a feeding program where everyone lines up and receives a handout. It's about sharing together as friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters. And so what is God calling us to? Remember my story that I began with? God gave me this 5-year kind of time frame. Now, I've lived much longer than those 5 years that God originally gave me. Praise to God. But what is God calling us to over the next 5 years? And I want to finish with the story of Gideon. And for us as a movement, I love the story of Gideon. Gideon's army was reduced from 32,000 men that he had amassed to 300 leaders. 300 leaders. You can read the story of Gideon in Judges chapter 7. And this reminds us that God is not about the mighty, the strong, the buildings, the budgets, the vehicles. God doesn't need big men. God needs humble and available men and women. And so as we invest in the Alongsiders movement that God has called us to, and we think about how God took and raised up Gideon's 300 willing, humble, and alert men and women, I want to ask you today, are you willing to be a part of a cohort, just like Gideon, of 300 who are leading movements, who are taking forward the work of God here on earth to see disciples made in every nation, in every state, in every village, in every community? That's the movement that God has called us to. And I like to think that God is calling us just as He called the men and women of Gideon to be leaders who are not afraid of doing mighty things for the glory of God. All right, bless you all. Thank you.